Data Storytellers, a long-awaited episode here on our AI Executive Series. Nurtekin and I connected a couple of weeks back, and we're excited to explore a very interesting conversation about AI and also other topics. So, Nurtekin, first of all, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Laszlo. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So look, before we dive into your career playbook, I have a bunch of questions that I want to ask you about, what you've done over at Fidelity and Amazon and Visa, and obviously now you are at PayPal. Now, before we dive in, or even, before kind of like an in-depth introduction, it's a very dynamic space today in AI and analytics, right? So Gen AI kind of lit everything on fire. It was the spark that really catalyzed this huge revolution that we're living through. I always like to say that we are in an AI bubble, but it's the kind of bubble that the dot-com bubble was, right? So it bursted not because the internet ended up being not such a big deal, but because the revolution was so huge that market forces naturally behave in a certain way in that environment. So what do you make of this whole AI landscape? It's an intentionally large question, that I'm asking you. But how do you see things being different from even 2-3 years ago, right? Which is a long time in the 21st century.
Yeah. Hey, thanks. That's a very relevant and important question. Obviously, AI is going extremely fast, and there are a lot of people working on it. I think there. In a lot of ways, it's similar to other tech revolutions, like you mentioned, the internet revolution. And if you look at other historical technological innovations, this seems similar in a lot of ways. It's a pivotal point in how humanity is going to evolve, but also in a lot of ways, it's different. One way it's different is, in my opinion, the number of people, whether those are scientists or practitioners that are interested in it, that are working on it, that are trying to build on top of one another. And that's one of the reasons why it's going so fast and so quickly and changing on a day-to-day basis. It's in our everyday lives, and we're using it. And as we're using it, we're all providing feedback to the people that are working on this. So I see this trend continuing. I don't know. It would be speculation to say there's going to be a bust coming soon. Although I did read a Gartner research today that 40% of agentic AI use cases will be canceled in 2017. So that gives you even more sense of like how fast things can go up and down. But that's even speculation. I think as long as you are applying AI in a way that makes sense for whatever your use case is, I think the chances are you'll be successful. And if you go back to the principles of, hey, we're here, like if you're a for-profit organization and you go back to the principles of, I want to improve customer experience, I want to generate profits, or I want to improve some sort of operations, reduce cost, and you use AI in that direction, and you experiment your way into it, I think you'll be successful. I don't think it's going to be a across all industries type of a bust. It's probably going to be folks who are using AI just for the sake of AI, some POCs just to show people that they're applying AI. They may fail, and they will likely fail, but the ones that are the ones that have good foundational and building on top of that, I think they're going to continue to succeed and continue to advance.
Absolutely. And I like how you put it, that it would be a bold prediction to say that that will be a bust. And I think that even if there's a little bit of a burst, it's more like a market correction rather than a bust. I mean, I think most people already forgot about the dot-com bubble, right? It's just basically, from our perspective, everything just changed overnight, even though on the ground at the time it was less clear and it was a little bit more messy. And I actually saw that Gartner research today, right? So it just came out, I think, this morning. Now, what's interesting is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but Gartner, and we love Gartner, by the way. All of our members are also Gartner members. I think they do fantastic work. but you can't get everything right. Even McKinsey gets things wrong all the time, right? But I think they did get Gen AI wrong, right? So actually Gartner kind of had a wrong kind of predictive arc on how Gen AI will play out, right? So they kind of expected a similar bust that never arrived. So I don't know if you followed that.
I do. Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of people did expect Gen AI to see some sort of a slowdown, at least in terms of how LLMs are scaling up, and I don't think we're seeing a slowdown there. It still seems to look like the more data you feed into these machines, and the more capacity you give them in terms of parameters, it looks like they're gaining additional properties. So those predictions were definitely wrong, and I'm not saying we're not going to see that kind of a slowdown. It's very possible, but at least so far, we haven't witnessed it. We haven't observed it yet.
So I'm just too tempted to talk around these topics before we move any further, right? So this is fascinating. So LLMs, they were the watershed moment where, because AI has been around, for a while. It has been around in the public consciousness, right, as a kind of future super intelligence. And also it has been around in pragmatic, practical business realities as well for a while, right? Mainly in the context of business analytics and business, data solutions. AI and machine learning has been applied for a while, but then large language models, especially with ChatGPT, that seems to be that watershed moment where everything changed, right? So even though there is a kind of a gradual improvement and implementation and progress of these technologies, when ChatGPT happened and it became part of the public consciousness, shook everything up, right? So yep. What we think, the average person, when we talk about AI, and this is also a personal opinion, but I think it's somewhat objective as well, that when the average person thinks about AI, they think about an intelligence that thinks like a human, right? And we kind of project our own assumptions onto a technology like this, because if it sounds like a human, if it smells like a human, if it behaves like a human, right, it must also work like a human, right? So we hear and read about these dystopian, futuristic sci-fi projections about how AI will, gather its own army and take over humanity. But then if you kind of read between the lines with those predictions, there's always like human intent and human motivations and human ambitions projected onto a technology that does not possess that, right? And when I say this, I think it's less of an opinion. We know how LLMs are built. We know that LLMs are essentially mimicking machines, right? So what they are amazingly good at is mimicking human output, right? That's why they seem super impressive in many ways, but at the same time, a lot of times we have these kind of weird moments where even though it speaks so eloquently and it can write a sonnet like Shakespeare, at the same time it can get, fourth grade math wrong, right? So what I'm getting at here is the question of AGI. Okay. And again, we'll talk about, very pragmatic business realities soon, but I'd love to hear your take. I saw you actually post about it and comment on this. That when we think about AGI now, people have this idea that the performance stacking and scaling of LLMs will inevitably kind of result in what we understand as AGI, right? And there's another camp that says that, well, actually, because of how LLMs work foundationally, that is not what we mean by that, right? So AGI cannot be brought about by that. So what do you think about the limits of LLMs and LLM technology specifically? And also, if you think about how we've been improving the performance of LLMs so far, which is feeding them more and more and more data, but we're seemingly, and again, you're probably more informed about this than I am, but we seemingly are hitting the limit of the amount of data that we can feed them. And the more data is generated by AI, if AI is trained on its own data, then there's something like model collapse. I put out a lot of stuff there, right? So I'm going to stop talking, but what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah. So first of all, you're right. So when machine learning before that statistical modeling evolved over time slowly, and when ChatGPT came out, it looks like the trajectory changed completely, and it's because ChatGPT, like you said, thinks like a human, acts like a human, responds like a human. It's especially for folks who are not formally trained on this, it seems like magic. So it's simply, as you know, it's the underlying technology transformers, which are highly scalable machine learning algorithms that can learn from massive amounts of data. They can scale really easily. And when what happened is when we did that, certain types of properties emerged that we were not even the researchers were expecting to see them. We're still trying to figure out how those things emerged. I don't think we fully know how these things do what they do, and that's primarily one of the reasons why people are starting to connect the dots between like LLMs and AGI. Nobody connected the dots between sport vector machines and AGI before, because we had a much deeper understanding of how that worked, and the theoretical basis of it. We don't as much with LLMs. It's a lot of it is empirical experimentation based achievements, right? Like you say, okay, what if I just double the number of parameters, and what if I just throw the whole set of internet at it, and let's see what happens. And then you run a bunch of experiments and you discover, oh, it can do this and it can do that, and you had no idea that it could write a poem like Shakespeare, but it's unable to do first grade math. Like, we didn't know theoretically that's what the outcome would have been. So because of the unknown factor, I think we're um, like in a sci-fi movie type of a situation, where when you don't know what's happening, you're thinking there's a lot more to it behind the scenes. But I think over time, as we uncover the technology and understand what's happening, we'll be able to know whether LLMs is the path for AGI or not. There are great thinkers out there that do not think LLMs is the path for AGI, Jan LeCun being one of them. LLMs just don't build a worldview. Like, if you're thinking about AGI, a machine that can act like a human, not just in written format, but can also operate within an environment with obstacles, and able to reason, plan, make decisions, learn from mistakes. I don't think LLMs have that capacity or that capability yet. I think it'll be a component of AGI, but I am not. I don't think it's the thing that's going to arise to AGI, because, like I said, there's a lot more modals than just text that you need to be able to build a system like that. Does that make sense?
So it makes perfect sense. And I loved what you said about the emergence of certain behaviors in LLMs that we still don't really understand. And this is why I love having these conversations, because this kind of insights come real time, is that there's actually a concept in physics called emergence. So if you think about, let's say, a flock of birds or a school of fish, right? And they move in unison. There's no leader of the pack. So there's no centrally coordinated action. But when the birds and the fish kind of come together, they operate on a very basic algorithm, right, of how they, in their peripheral view, see the other fishes and how they respond in connection to their movements, which we don't understand fully, by the way. But what emerges from that seeming chaotic randomness is something that actually has a shape and a form and moves in unison, right? So I kind of see that when you have enough complexity, even in systems that we build, this emergence happens because we still operate within the confines and the boundaries of physics itself. So I love that, and I actually haven't seen anyone talk about this before. So maybe there's some good thought leadership pieces for someone out there listening if they know more about this. So this is great. And then what you're telling me also kind of gives me that idea that by developing AI, we actually learn more about ourselves as well. Because when AI stops behaving the way we expect it to, that actually tells us something about ourselves, right? That sometimes we think about ourselves as kind of like robots and just kind of like a collection of machines, which we are in a way. Well, there might be something more as well, right? So it's a fascinating field right now. I think being in AI, there is the buzz and there's the hype and everyone wants to be, the AI expert and the AI executive, but it's a genuinely fascinating area of research, both in terms of business, but also even in, philosophy and physics and our understanding of ourselves.
Yeah, totally. And I do want to touch on something else that you mentioned before. LLM performance, is it hitting a plateau, related to the data that we're feeding into it? We've reached the limits. Now AI is generating a lot of data, code, etc., which is becoming its own. So it's becoming an interesting feedback loop mechanism there. I think what I'm excited about is, there's the whole general purpose LLMs and where they're going to, but there's also specialized LLMs, more when you think about it from an organizational context. Organizations have a lot of data, and these LLMs don't necessarily have easy access to these organizational data because they're more, protected in private data centers and whatnot. So naturally, these LLMs don't have access to that data. But as organizations adopt LLMs and fine tune them, they may reach different heights in terms of performance when it comes to those specialized use cases. So, for example, if you have if you're running a travel website and you have a customer service capability there, a chat capability, and you're bringing an LLM there, and you have years of historical conversations which you can use to fine-tune that LLM, which the LLM doesn't naturally have coming in, but you can fine-tune that now because you have that data as that organization. Now you can achieve a different type of performance for that interaction, that particular use case, than generalized LLMs could ever get to. So I think the next frontier of LLMs is going to be data centric in terms of the quality of the data that you're feeding it and the specialization of the data that you're feeding it. And organizations, like I said, could achieve a different level of performance than what we're seeing in generalized LLMs.
Absolutely. And so connected to the evolution of LLMs, right? So we heard ChatGPT and then a bunch of others popped up. The conversation for a while was all about the models. What can the models do? How much energy the models need to operate well? So because of all the attention and the energy and the money that went into it, so this is also, by the way, a comment on how I always like to say that Caesar crossed the Rubicon. So too much capital has already been deployed in this space for like a real bust to happen anytime soon, right? There's just too much that's going on already. But the model conversation, yeah, right. So the model conversation doesn't seem to be that interesting anymore, right? So now what we're looking at is actually what we do with those models and what kind of products we build with those models and what kind of experiences we orchestrate with those products to the users. And then the agentic AI conversation popped up. So this is probably the agentic AI. Now we're talking about something that the average person probably haven't even heard of, right? It may be part of their reality to some degree, but it's probably more like a conversation within the trade itself right now. The exploration of agentic AI. I just watched a video about. I'm blanking on the lady's name. Everything is happening pretty fast in this space, but I think she is. She was commenting on how basically with agentic AI, the evolution of agentic AI really points to us having to, at least on the consumer level, having to give permission, kind of an overarching permission to an agent to operate in multiple areas of our lives, right? So let's say if you want an agentic AI solution to book a holiday for you, right? Then it needs access to different accounts that you have, your credit card, your phone, right? So there are all kinds of concerns about giving an agent, any kind of agent, such power over your, personal assets, if you will. And I was thinking that this is this the same also when we talk about enterprise applications, right? Because when we talk about enterprise applications, though, you're already operating within a certain sandbox, right? So what are your thoughts around the concerns with regards to agentic AI? What do you think about agentic AI in general? Is there more buzz around it than reality? And what do you think about the enterprise applications of it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of buzz, that's for sure. Everybody in organizations are talking about this, thinking about it. At least the forward-thinking organizations are talking about it, um, and it's a really interesting concept. Now, I don't know if it can or should be applied everywhere, um, and you just kind of have to think about like what is the purpose of agentic AI, and in my mind, it is to empower an end user to get something done in a in a simple with a simple set of instructions, over a conversational or textual UI without needing to do all the steps yourself. Of course, like you said, there's a lot of security data related issues that need to be resolved. Which agents have what type of entitlements? Should all the agents in an agentic AI workflow have access to everything, or is there one central agent, for example, that is extremely secure, and that's the only one that can access your payment information, your PII, and only passes the appropriate things to the other agents downstream. So a lot of that needs to be figured out, and just we're just getting into building industry-wide interoperable frameworks like MCP servers and things of that nature. So a lot of these things need to be thought out, and we don't know yet. We don't know how this is going to work. Um, Organizations are trying to use agentic AI internally, and I would say those are safer. Those are safer because it's within the firewalls of an organization, and you can find use cases that's not using PII, that is not using sensitive data, but it's still a lot of tasks. Let's say you find a task that you're doing in an organization that requires a lot of different steps, and let's just take the example of you are, let's say the business team is writing a requirements document, and they're passing this to a software development team, and the software development team is coding it, and they're passing it to a testing team. Testing team is building the test cases, testing the code that was built, and then they're passing it to a deployment. You can see like how many different handoffs and manual work. So and let's just assume that there is no PII exchange here. So you can build an agentic capability here that basically takes. First agent could basically take the requirements from the business team. Let's say the business user uploads the requirements document. First agent understands what the requirements are, figures out, okay, here's the attributes that I need to use. Here's the objective. Here's what I need to write code for. And then it generates the code for that and then passes it to the next agent, which automatically creates test cases, automatically tests it, validates it, and then passes it to a deployment agent, so on and so forth. So you can find use cases that are highly manual, that have a lot of hops, that are connected well, that are well defined, basically robotic already, but it's being done by humans. You can put agentic AI there, experiment your way into it, and try to grow from there, as opposed to starting right away from the most sensitive use cases. That doesn't mean we shouldn't explore the sensitive use cases, because we will never figure out how to do that unless we start doing that. But I do expect organizations to solve a lot of inefficiencies internally, generate a lot of cost savings, and a lot of reducing time to market and things like the benefits like that through using agentic AI in safer ways within the construct of an organization. So that's how I think, or that's how I'm seeing this stuff unfold. But it is an interesting thing, and we just have to see how it evolves.
Absolutely. And even in our community, when we come together for our sprints during the year, actually now one of the big topics is obviously agentic AI from many different angles, including, how do you actually fuel AI with context-rich, usable, governed data in an enterprise setting? right? But also what kind of AI strategy this sits within. I know that AI strategy is the definition of noise today, right? So everyone comes at you with their AI strategy that they want to sell. So everyone wants to actually see examples of an AI strategy, conceptualization and rollout and deployment and successful AI product building so that they can kind of model that. One thing that is a big topic is the boardroom narrative or the boardroom narratives, right? So right now, if you think about AI, there's also a narrative battleground that we're looking at. It's kind of like the Wild West, right? So one of the reasons for the dot-com bubble was that basically startups were talking to investors, which is a very specific type of conversation, right? So there, the solutions that are being built are positioned in a certain way, and then expectations are set in a certain way, and that's a very typical like startup investor dynamic that plays out. But everyone is caught up in that, right? So CEOs right now are caught up in that narrative, and also startups are pitching to executives who don't necessarily, have the required data literacy, AI fluency, because how would they, right? It's just too fast as it's developing. So that a lot of enterprise AI and analytics and AI analytics and data leaders find themselves trying to correct some of those wrong assumptions, and also to capture the narrative and ground it in reason and expertise, right? What is your experience talking with your peers and just seeing this play out? How do you see this narrative battleground today?
Yeah, so you mentioned AI strategy, and the narrative around that. So having a robust AI strategy is critical, but the question is, how do you come up with one? And AI strategy is not just a set of random list of use cases that an organization is going to just plug, hey, we'll use LLM here and here and here. Well, for what purpose? Where is this taking you in the long run? So what you need to do, what every organizational unit, the atomic unit, whether that's, let's say, a credit organization, or whether that's, product A, product B, whatever that atomic unit is in an organization, what they need to do is they need to look at what's their business process today, or life cycle, whatever you want to call it, right? How do you acquire customers? How do you maintain those customers? How do you make money from those customers? What's the experience of that customer along the journey with you as an organization? And different products can have different life cycles. First, you need to have a really grounded understanding of what that is. Once you have that, then you need to look at every single major step in that life cycle and say, okay, what is the big AI bet here, right? Like, what is the thing that let's say you're acquiring customers. Most businesses have that problem, right? You need to go find customers and acquire them. What is the most optimal AI tool you can do to, let's say, 2x, 3x, 5x your acquisition efficiency, capability, volume? And when you think like that, then you're able to uncover those big AI bets and stitch them across the life cycle. And when you do that, and when you articulate it, then you're basically thinking about truly an AI first strategy, because now you're taking your existing life cycle. You're saying, I'm going to reinvent this life cycle with these big AI bets. And along the way, most likely that life cycle is going to shift, because there's a very good chance that, for example, in your acquisition strategy, you're going to or introduce a channel like a conversational AI channel. And that's going to change some of the customer experience or the dynamics or how they interact with you. So you have to be flexible enough to let the life cycle shift as you're implementing these big bets. But it starts from really understanding and being grounded on, how do you do the work today? How does your customer flows through your organization? What are the big AI bets? How do you stitch them together? And then this may sound like a huge bet, and a lot of organizations like, wow, this is like a 5-year strategy. And where do we start? Then each one of those big bets that you've identified, you can break it down to an MVP. Like, what's the simplest thing you can build in each one of those that's pointing you in that direction? Then you go build that simple thing. And if it's taking you more than 3 months, you're probably overcomplicating it. So in this day and age, with all the tools that we have, you should be able to take any one of those big bets, experiment with them in a very simple environment, in a very simple way, to validate your assumptions, to see if it is the big idea that you think it is. And once you confirm that assumption, then you go to phase two, and slowly you know where to point the shift because you've already figured that out. So if you create a narrative around that and you say you're grounded on how you do business today, and you can also estimate the value that you're going to generate from doing all of this, you could shut off a lot of the noise and focus your attention on how much customer, how am I improving my customer experience? How much value am I generating for my organization and or whoever your stakeholders are? And if you're having the conversation and that way, and if the narrative is around that, I think it's very easy to get support from whether those are executives or stakeholders or whoever it is that you need to get those votes from. It becomes simpler as opposed to the current approach of let's just bring in all these LLM tools, let's get a platform, let's get a monitoring tool, and let's get this data and this BI tool. It's all about tools, right? That's important because you can't do any of the things that I just said without it. You have to be grounded on the current process and the current pain points.
I love so much about this. It was one of the best, 3-minute encapsulations of AI strategy and how you should approach it that I've heard. So one quick note on that, just what you said, Laz, that right now there is a risk because there's so much appetite for AI, that you can actually very easily fall into that mistake of just focusing on the tools and starting to just, throw as many platforms and models at the problem as you can, and that has huge risks, right? So that's one. The other, I love how you build this whole approach on the business equation. The business equation is something that we've been talking about in the community as well, like how you kind of need to understand on a foundational level how your organization, how your company generates value and how it makes money. It can always be broken down into an equation which won't, correspond 100% to reality, but it can cover a lot about understanding the different metrics and factors of how you generate that value and how your organization makes money. So standing on those foundations, and then this is actually something that I wanted to talk to you about, is this idea. I like how you framed the whole thing around what is the big AI bet, right? So this is connected to always, okay, what is the big idea? But the big idea is framed as a bet. It automatically puts us on the right track, that it is going to be a bet. And as every bet, well, we can either win or lose. So how we can set ourselves up for success to maximize the chance of winning, and then if we win, maximize the chance of return from that win, right? And immediately now we're having a healthier conversation with the right expectations set. And this leads us to this experimentation concept. Building a culture of experimentation is one of the most popular themes in our community, right? So I think it was first popularized by Kate Goodine, who used to be leading data enablement over at Expedia. She was also the head of marketing analytics over at Miro when she kind of built this approach within our community. Shout out to Kate. She's been on the podcast like twice now. And everyone loved her approach. And it's mainly a mindset installation in the organization to be okay with experimentation. And then also there's a whole process of how you do that experimentation. I saw you post about this, and I think you were kind of picking at the language of failing fast versus learning fast. Right? And why language matters when we talk about these topics is fascinating to me. So maybe can you talk a little bit more about that? How do you approach this whole idea of culture of experimentation? How do you conceptualize it? And then what are you actually propagating in a business when you join?
Yeah, so experimentation is so key to everything. It is. Everybody talks about it. Very few people or organizations get it right. It is so critical to how AI is going to function when all is said and done. Now, a lot of organizations think they have a lot of data, which is true. But what they have is a lot of observational data, which is very, there's not a lot of variation around that data. It's usually the same type of customers coming, doing the same things, getting the same output. Maybe there's some small little variations here and there, but not a lot. And that's the organization's fault because they never ventured out. They never said, okay, I want to go after this completely different customer segment and see what they do. I'm going to offer this, insanely different, campaign with a different characteristics and see how it does. And, you know, just like humans, humans learn from novel experiences. You're not going to learn if you're reading the same book every single day. You'll learn a little, but you're going to reach a limit. You need to pick up a different book, and hopefully from a different type of a book, and that's going to, like, as humans we learn that way, and similarity between humans and machines learn that way as well. The more variation there exists in the data, the better the algorithms learn, the more robust they are, the more resilient they are, the more generalizable they become. So it's really important, even if just, if you're in an organization and you want to have a robust AI strategy, you cannot get there. No matter what you have, you cannot get there without a robust experimentation framework. And what I mean by that is, creating a lot of variation around your experience, around your product, around your campaigns. The simplest way to think about it is you have a campaign that you're showing to your customers. It's, let's say, some dollar off. Well, change that campaign around, apply different dollars off, try a percentage off, do a lot of different coloring schemes. This is a very simple example. Obviously, a lot of people do this, but you can extend that to product constructs as well. You can extend that to experiences, and through that, you're going to collect a lot of data. That's going to not only, even if you didn't have AI, that's in and of itself insanely valuable, but with AI, it's even 10x more valuable than insanely valuable, because when you do an experimentation, right? Let's say you're testing 1,000 different variations of a product, and many of those are going to fail, which is the language that I have an issue with, the word that I have an issue with. It's not actually failure, because even if you get one, let's say, click on one of those 1,000 variations, now that one individual, and I'm exaggerating by one, it's a lot more in reality, but that one click just gave you a vote. This type of person likes that type of a variation. That's what they're interested in. So now you can build insights around it. You can build intelligence, or you can productionalize that pattern. And then when a new person that looks like that person comes along, instead of constantly running experiments trying to learn what that person may or may not respond to, you already know that. So you can say, okay, I've seen this before. Now I can show this. It's a rare behavior, but now I've seen it before, and I've learned, and I've institutionalized it. Now I can actually show them what they're going to respond to. So to get to that point where you're running thousands and thousands of experiments on a daily basis, and built an engine around it, you need a quite a few things to happen in an organization. Of course, first and foremost, like I said in that post, language matters. So if you call it, let's fail quickly, failing has a negative connotation. I understand the reason why we say that, to make people comfortable with the idea of failing, but it's really not failing in the context of experimentation, at least, right? In the context of experimentation, there's no failing. No matter what you do, you're not failing. So I think that needs to change. But in addition to that, you also need other things in place. You need the tools. You need an experimentation platform that allows you to quickly launch experiments, that allows you to split your traffic, that allows you to report on these experiments on as real time as possible, so that you can quickly move on to the other ones when you've observed sufficient amount of data. You need people. You need amazing experimental designers. Each experiment needs to be crafted carefully, because a wrong experimentation is just like picking up the wrong book and reading it, and you're thinking you're learning physics when you're actually learning chemistry. So you need to experiment on what you intended to learn, and that just doesn't happen. It's not just about splitting the traffic A and B. There's a lot of nuances in there. and I can give you a lot of examples around those nuances, but those need to be set up very carefully, and there are people with specialized skills who can do this really well, and you need to make sure you have enough of those folks plugged into the right business units that understand the business, that understand the customer experience, so that they can figure out what those experimental designs need to be. You also need other people as well. You need marketers who are going to think about the different variations and experiences and create those things. We can also talk about like how AI is going to come and augment all of these activities, which it will. But essentially, you need the infrastructure, the experimentation infrastructure, plus the people, and the right executive language that supports it to be able to get there. And I've seen organizations do this very, very successfully. And I've worked at Amazon, and I could point to Amazon as a real experimental machine that, at least while I was there, was doing it in the right way. And I could say that I've learned a lot of things about experimentation there.
So this is actually, it gives me like a certain like perspective on this whole experimentation. One of the word failure, right? So one of the board of advisor members we have is Dejan Mitkovsky. He used to be the VP of data at FanDuel. Now he's at BetMGM, just rolling out their AI transformation program. And when he was at FanDuel, he actually had a cash prize for his team, so that the person who had the biggest failure in experimentation that year earned a cash prize, right? So they were kind of racing to get these failures. But I love the framing of it, that at the same time, a failure is not really a failure, right? So even the language around it, that no, it happens with a certain goal, with a certain target. So maybe this is something that I'll speak with Dejan about, because he's flying here to Vancouver later this summer to record some content here in the studio. So also, Dejan used to be at Amazon too. So can you give a few examples, without, revealing any kind of, industry secrets or, specific projects, of how did you see Amazon do experimentation well on a cultural level? Whatever you can share, that would be super interesting.
Yeah, I would say there were many concurrent experiments running at any given point in time. Every single day, there was an experiment running, and not just one or two, a lot. I won't name, I won't number, I won't let you know, I'm not going to tell you how many, but it was a lot of experiments. We weren't afraid. I guess this is where the culture comes into play. We weren't afraid of just changing the construct of the product or the offer or the experience and just launching it just to see what's going to happen with it. And obviously, there are guardrails. There are certain things that you are not going to do, and you operate within. You have principles that you follow, and within those guardrails and principles, we were free to evaluate and experiment on a lot of different things. And the expectation was, at any given point in time, you have to have dozens and dozens of experiments running in the market. And those things later on, like I said, could become the unbiased data that you can use in your AI models, because then you've learned what type of customer is applying or is interested in what type of variation. Now you can take this intelligence and scale it to the entire population of customers that you have. So that's the kind of a feedback loop between you experiment with a small group of customers, like you don't experiment with 100% of your base. That's very expensive, because then the ones that are performing actually have a cost. So you do experiment with a small portion of your customers, but then you use that to scale to your full base. And that's the kind of a feedback loop between experimentation and scale that you can use to create that machinery that we're talking about.
That's fascinating. And when we talk about experimentation, I mean, good experimentation always rests on solid, stable foundations. And I saw you post about the specialized foundation models in the future of AI in certain organizations, kind of connected to this, right? So I think you mentioned Stripe's payment foundation model, also Netflix's recommendations foundations model. So can you talk a little bit more about that and why it's relevant to the conversation?
Yes. I think the future of uh, AI in organizations is through foundation models, and it's data centric. And I can hit on both. So foundation models, like think about ChatGPT or any other LLM. They all have foundation models, which is basically a model that has learned from sufficient amount of language data, achieved some emerging properties. Now it's able to do zero shot predictions or few shot predictions. That's all we're doing when we're engaging with these Gen AI tools. You're writing a prompt, which is either a zero shot request, or it's you give it a couple of examples and you say, can you come up with more examples similar to that, which is a few shot request. So a similar thing can be imagined in an organizational setting, right? Organizations have these massive amounts of data. It's a different kind of data, so the architecture of the underlying foundation model needs to be adjusted to fit the different types of data. Tabular data, there's textual data, there's voice data. It's also multimodal from that perspective. So you can, in theory, you can train a model that can learn from all the data that you have. Let's say as an organization, you're running a product and you have a lot of customers. As part of that product, these customers generate a lot of activity. They generate a lot of data. You also have a bunch of experimentation data. You can also bring that in. You can, in theory, train a model similar to a foundation model of an LLM that can pick up the patterns of your customers that you otherwise cannot pick up through traditional modeling or machine learning or any other analytical exercise. So then in theory, these models could also achieve some level of emerging properties. Now, the question is, what are those properties going to be? It's going to be different than what LLMs are doing because the underlying data is different. But in my opinion, the emerging properties would be also zero shot or few shot learning, meaning you could train a foundation model for a product or a set of products that are relevant, or maybe an entire organization. And then you could do predictions. You can prompt this model to do predictions that matter to that company. You can say, hey, forecast this KPI for next quarter. Or you can say, hey, this customer just did this. What should I do next? And obviously, you're not going to have humans sitting there and engaging with these. It'll be machines basically constantly prompting this foundation model layer and then taking actions based on the output that they get from these models. But what this does is it greatly simplifies the infrastructure of an organization. If you have a few foundation models, and you can do zero shot, few shot learning predictions on top of this, you don't need individual models and the entire pipeline that supports those models. I've seen organizations with hundreds of thousands of individual models, each having their own data pipeline, deployment pipeline, monitoring pipeline, and it's just like replicated for each model. You don't need that anymore in this construct. So it greatly simplifies model management. It reduces time to market greatly. You can experiment with a lot of things. And the way experimentation comes into play is you can fine tune these. So let's say you built a foundation model using all your observational data from the past. You have 20 years of data. You used all that, you built a foundation model. Well, that foundation model knows a lot, but it doesn't know everything. It just doesn't know things that's outside of that data that you just trained it with. So in order to make it more robust and resilient, and more generalizable, you continue to run your experiments that's outside of what you've observed in the past, and you feed that into the foundation model. You basically fine tune it, if you will, and now you can prompt this model and ask questions about those edge cases that you otherwise wouldn't have much insight on. So obviously with this comes a lot of conversations around like, what about explainability? This is going to be a black box. And there are many industries that don't necessarily require a lot of explainability. So I think those could be first to market when it comes to these sort of capabilities, and or industries that require explainability do need to figure out, how do I when I get some sort of prediction from this foundation model, how do I also extract the reasoning behind that prediction? This is an active area of research, and I wouldn't say it's fully there yet in terms of the robustness of the explanations, but it's getting there. So I think in the next couple of years, and explainability research catches up or keeps up, we're going to see a lot of organizations deploying these specialized models in individual business units, which then feed to maybe an Uber foundation model that's at the company level that can do a lot of different things for the organization. And I think this could be the thing that's powering agentic AI, because agentic AI it's a shell, right? It's an agent is saying, okay, hey, I just saw this customer. What should I do? Well, who's going to give the answer? It needs to be this sort of an infrastructure and a framework that the agentic AI is prompting to extract an answer to do what's next.
It's fascinating because this has been in the making literally for the past, 25, 30 years, all the way back to the very, quote unquote primitive kind of foundational data-driven ways of working at companies. And now we're here. And it's all kind of still, if not a straight line, but definitely a continuous line. So speaking about this, how did you get into data and analytics? Like, what was your entry point into this whole space?
Okay, so my entry to this whole space was I was training to be a civil engineer. a really bad internship experience where I was in a tunnel construction, and I was knee deep in mud the entire summer in scorching heat. And I said, look, I can't do this for a living. This is no way to make a living for me. I totally respect the men and women that do this, because without them, we wouldn't have all the greatness of the things around us, the buildings, the bridges. Like it's amazing. And that's what attracted to me, because you build something and you can see it. But it just wasn't for me. But I did get a lot of like quant math skills as a result of that training and education. So that kind of led me into the path into analytics. I came to the US. I was formally trained. I was born and raised in Turkey. I went to school there. That's where I got my civil engineering degree. And then when I decided to pivot, I came to the US for graduate school, studied more analytical topics, finance, etc. And I actually wanted to get into investment banking. And this was like a family thing. A lot of my family members were in that space, so I wanted to be there as well. I thought it was so cool to be an investment banker. And this was the .com bust era where all the investment banks were really struggling and they weren't hiring. So I got into this tiny company called AOL. Not so tiny, maybe tiny now, but not so tiny back then. And into their marketing analytics team. I got into the company. I didn't really know what marketing analytics meant. I knew how to do analysis. I knew data. I knew numbers, and that just kind of got me into it. And I got into predictive analytics there as I was working in that organization, and that really captured my attention. I love science, and I realized that in a corporate setting, this is as close as you can get to science. And I just loved it. So that kind of got me into this track.
Okay, so it is ultimately business science. Like that's what it is, right? Like empirical principles applied in a business setting. And so I see that, you were at AOL and you were a manager, then you did some consulting in Cisco, right? But the next thing I see in 2005, right, is what you did at Visa. So what was your mandate at Visa? You spent 9 years there, right? So what was that role about, and what were your highlights?
Yeah, so Visa was my entry point into payments slash financial services. Visa was interesting when I joined. It was an association, so it was owned by the banks. And 3 years into my tenure there, Visa went public, so it became a independent, publicly owned company, which changed a lot of dynamics. So it went from a very risk averse organization to a much more forward looking, tech driven, wanting to be more like a fintech type of an organization, which I think put Visa in a really good path in the long run. Um, so my experience there was mostly around like data analytics, and I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of things there, from credit cards, debit products, loyalty programs and products. I worked on risk, transactional uh, risk, fraud, but all analytical in nature, building models, doing analytics, extracting insights, managing data. And I really learned a lot about the different players of the payments ecosystem, whether those are issuing banks or acquiring banks or the payment networks, and how the whole ecosystem works. So that's kind of what led me into the role at Amazon, which I would say was the revolutionary step in my career, which when I look back, I see that time at Amazon and the decision to move from Visa to Amazon as that pivotal point.
So this is cool, like being in a pre-IPO Visa situation, right? That's like a very cool time to be there and see that transition take place. It's funny because also one of our advisory board members is Albert Mangajas, who's the chief data officer over at Turo, the car sharing company. And yeah, they are working on fascinating stuff also with regards to agentic AI, and they are preparing for an IPO. So I know that there is a profound shift that takes place on the other side of that. And with Amazon, so how did that happen? You spent 3 years there. What was your mandate over at Amazon, and what were your favorite experiences that you think kind of informed your professional career?
Yeah, um, so my mandate there was leading the data analytics and machine learning team to optimize Amazon payment product customer experience, optimizing ad placement with respect to credit card and financial services products. So we had an ad optimization engine that determined which customer gets to see what offer um, uh, during the checkout path. Which generated a lot of value for Amazon payment products in general, but for Amazon as well. Some of the really key things that I remember from that experience. First of all, the culture, the amazing amounts of empowerment you felt. I mean, and I wasn't a high level executive then, but I still felt like I had the room, I had the empowerment to make decisions, to set a goal and to do whatever it takes to achieve that goal. And I owned the area. It was very well defined. Amazon is a big believer in single threaded ownership. And I knew what I owned, and I knew that I was the single threaded owner. And I knew that if I didn't manage that as my own company, if you will, then nobody else is going to do it for me. Nobody's going to come and tell me what to do. So I have to figure it out. So I have to figure out, okay, what's our product strategy, what's our channel strategy, and what's our marketing strategy. And I need to make sure I have the right ML optimization tools to support all of that, and not just to support the things that we're doing today, but also think about 2, 3, 5 years down the line and make the right investments. So that culture was really captivating to me. And it's a difficult, it can be a difficult culture depending on who you are. And for me, my personality, I just love operating in that kind of hey, this is your area, you're independent, go figure it out. We're going to evaluate you based on your success, based on the metrics and goals that we align on. So I love that. I love the leadership principles, the 14 leadership principles. I don't know, maybe there's more now, but back in the day, it was, I could recite a lot of them still to this day, and they became so native to me that I started using them at home with my kids and my wife, and we would say, hey, what we need to do, like. I would use the leadership principles as the framework on saying, "Hey, let's do this or let's do that," because we need to think big, or we need to learn and be curious. Those are some of the leadership principle keywords that everybody at Amazon uses. And one of the interesting things about leadership principles at Amazon was, like I mentioned, it becomes super native to you, and it's not just something fake, right? I've seen other organizations try to replicate it, and it just feels fake. Nobody uses it, and everybody kind of laughs at it on the sidelines. But at Amazon, it was really like you used it for performance management. You used it to hire people, to evaluate, hiring. You used it in a lot of different contexts. I'll give you one example. I went to Amazon reInvent. This is after my experience at Amazon. I was at Fidelity at the time, and I was just walking around. Two Amazonians were talking, and I kind of heard them close enough. And one of them, I don't know what the context was, but one of them said, it was about another employee. One of them said, "Hey, that's not really customer obsessed." And I knew he wasn't just using that word just to sound smart. He was using it truly because he knows exactly what that means, and in the context made perfect sense to use it. So that's how native those leadership principles were. Everyone used it from at the time Jeff was still at the helm, so all the way from him all the way to the entry level roles. Everybody was expected to know them, use them, and live by them. So I love that as well. I loved the fact that we were so tech forward. We were we tried out things. If Amazon is launching something, we would be the first ones to use it. And the machine learning machinery that we built over there, it was incredible for its time. It was incredible for its time. I think it's incredible for today's time, even. What was done 10 years ago there, what is still, I would say, if you were to build it somewhere, random average company, it would be considered state of the art. So that's how amazing, and of course the people behind that, because these things don't build themselves, or at least back then it didn't. so these amazing people, smart as hell, and you get to work with them, you get to ideate with them, you get to learn from them, and it doesn't matter what the levels were. Everybody there, had what the mission and the visions were and goals, and you partnered, collaborated, and it was just a great experience overall.
So this is fascinating to me. And so from all those leadership principles, this might not be a principle, but it's more like a tactic that tends to go viral every once in a while on LinkedIn. You know how at Amazon, the meetings are not based on the classic, PowerPoint, everyone sits there, people kind of tune out in 2 minutes. But there is this idea of everything needs to be encapsulated and distilled into, I think, like a couple of pages. Maybe it's 2 pages. I'm not sure. And then when a meeting comes together, there's time dedicated and set aside for the participants to just sit and read that 2-pager. And then there's an organic conversation around it. Now, my assumption was always that it sounds nice. I don't know how that actually shakes out in reality, but it goes viral for a reason every once in a while. And it's also true that after people like it and share it on LinkedIn, everyone goes back to their business and starts just doing the PowerPoints, right? So is it actually real? Is that how it happened at Amazon? What was that? The operational reality?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens. It's actually a 6-pager usually, a 6-pager narrative. And I remember my first meeting on my first day. I go into a meeting, 15 to 20 people are there. Somebody walks in with a stack of papers, and everybody's passing them around. So I get one, and everybody's just quickly, heads down with their pen doing stuff. And I'm like, what's going on here? Because nobody told me this is how it is. So that was a really interesting first time experience where I actually saw it, and I've noticed, I've seen it, observed it, and done it myself in many meetings afterward. That's exactly how every single meeting happens. I don't remember seeing a single PowerPoint while I was there, except for the first day when you're in orientation, and it was a very simple PowerPoint, black and white, with a couple of slides and a couple of bullet points. And they did say this is the first and the last PowerPoint we would see at Amazon, and that turned out to be true. And it is true that that's exactly how it happens. The first 20-30 minutes is devoted to reading the narrative, and it's done because that way everybody's on the same page before discussing. If you send it in advance and you start the discussion right away, there's a very good chance half didn't read it, and they're going in blind, and they're just going to, like, in real time try to process. And everybody loves to make comments because, you know, otherwise why are you there? And people make comments that don't make sense or derail things. When you have this dedicated first half of the meeting to reading, everybody's on the same page, then you can have a much deeper conversation in the second half. So that also made a lot of sense to me.
So it's good to know that it's real and that it actually works out like that in real life. And you mentioned the application of these leadership principles also in real life. That's something I'm super passionate about, right? This is something that I like to apply in my own little universe here, right? So I have 2 kids, 2 under 2. So we got to get more efficient and more effective. So for example, one thing that we do is, you know, there's agile project management. At the heart of it, you have kind of a Kanban board. So I did implement the Kanban board, which we kind of build our lives around with my wife, to know exactly what are some of the plans that we have, you know, what are some of the projects in motion, and then where we stand, where are the blockers. It just really helps us to be grounded amidst the dynamic reality of being parents in a growing family. So what were some of those leadership principles that you actually took home in the literal sense?
Yeah, so I think a couple of them were like invent and simplify, because, you know, as at the time we had like yourself right now, a young family, and everything was chaotic. So simplification of our life was really important. I think, you know, learn and be curious was another one. I live and breathe that. You know, within my family and outside of my family, I'm very much into, you know, continuous education and all of that. So that's the thing that I was trying to instill to my family as well. I don't know. I guess, you know, depending on the context, it would just come up in a conversation with my family where I would just throw in these words, like the leadership principle keywords, but it would just come naturally. It's not like I was trying to be a smarty pants or anything like that. So that's how kind of native it became, because when you start using it in a lot of different contexts, you start to really feel what it means. So like customer obsessed, take customer obsession as an example. A lot of people think customer obsession is about obsessing over the customers that we serve, which is true. Obviously, you know, in the Amazon scenario, Amazon is there for its customers, but not everyone is going to be obsessed with that customer, because most people don't ever interact with that customer. They don't have a responsibility for the customer. Like I was running a machine learning team. I didn't, you know, a lot of the work that we did was for the product teams. So my customers were them. So I knew exactly who my customers were, and I obsessed over them, meaning I really wanted to understand what their strategies were. I really needed to understand what kept them at night. You know, what capabilities I need to build today so they feel like they have what they need to be successful a year or two later. So that's what customer obsession means. It's know who your customer is, who your specific customer is, not the end all be all customer. And if everybody knows who their customer is, that chain reaction ends up reaching to that final customer anyway, right? So, and if everybody's obsessed with their own individual customers, that's going to create a chain reaction where the chain is obsessed with that final customer. So it all works out.
This is a distinction I've never heard before, and it makes so much sense. So this is really, everyone focuses on their own customer, internal all the way to the external customer, right? So, okay, this is awesome. And yeah, absolutely. And so look, I mean, I think we could talk about these things forever, right? But I also know we have a limited time blocked out today. So all I would like to understand is what happened basically after Amazon. You went to Fidelity, heading up machine learning and AI as an SVP, and then head of data for the credit infrastructure, machine learning over at Capital One. So can you talk a little bit about those experiences spanning over 7 years and actually what you learned there?
Yeah, absolutely. So moving to Fidelity was as a result of two things. One is personal, one was professional. On the personal front, we wanted to, as a family, move to the East Coast. We were in the West Coast for a long time, a lot of family here. We were a young family with small kids. We thought, okay, let's be close to family. And Boston, vibrant place. We thought, okay, it'd be interesting to be there. It's a safe place, good schools. So it makes sense. So that's on the personal
side. The
Celtics. Of course, now, back in the day, I wasn't really a Celtics fan, but now, of course, you're obsessing over Celtics. So on the professional side, Fidelity offered something really interesting. They wanted me to run the AI Center of Excellence, which revolved a lot around figuring out how to make NLP work, natural language processing work for Fidelity. And this was interesting because I didn't have a lot of NLP experience going into it. So this was amazing. Like it's exactly in the novelty of experiences that we talked about before. And I wanted to try out something it's still within the world of machine learning, a lot of the same practices, frameworks, and tools apply, but it's a different underlying data. And I thought, and that was a really good decision from that perspective, because obviously what happened later on. So we worked on a lot of initiatives using pre-LLM, pre-transformer NLP technology, and firsthand saw how difficult it was to get an application out there using NLP. Other than simple, like at the time you could use NLP to do some analytics, you could do word counts and TF-IDF, things in that nature that gives you some insights around, let's say, what customers are talking about, topical analysis, and things of that nature. But if the minute you wanted to do something more quote unquote generative, we didn't call it generative at the time, but we were generating in an experimental setting language to see if we can solve customer problems. And it was really difficult to generate something that was coherent, that sounded like a human. A lot of the times it sounded like a machine. There was a lot of gibberish in there, grammatical errors, and obviously we figured out other ways to help correct that as much as we can. But it was really interesting to see the evolution of pre-transformer NLPs, and then how transformers made a massive difference in how some of the things that we thought were unsolvable back then is now like you don't even think about it. You think it's so naturally happening, right? So when you prompt an LLM, it generates a very coherent response. So that felt unsolvable before transformers, and having lived through that, the pain of that, and trying to, once you build something, trying to figure out, well, how do we, we know there's something here, but how do we deploy it in production? We can't use it for the customer, so what do we do with this? So there was a lot of tears and sweat trying to figure out how to make that technology work, and I think it was in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it is a typical example of seemingly unsolvable solutions are not unsolvable, but there is something that happens that no one can foresee, right? That kind of just emerges. Now, I know that there are, our main audience are data analytics leaders, AI professionals, AI executives, but we also have executives who are just super interested in data and analytics, and now, of course, AI. And they like to listen to the show because our guests tend to articulate things in a way that they can also understand. So how would you articulate the importance and the essence of transformers to a layperson, to, let's say, a CEO at a large organization who's super interested in applying AI, but they are saying, hey, transformers, what are transformers? How would you answer that question in a very concise, simplified way?
This is a good quiz to see how well I understand. If you can explain it to a 7-year-old, right, then you know what it is. So this is how I would say. First of all, the first thing I would say is transformers are so effective. I'm surprised in an organizational setting we're not talking about deploying more transformers across the board. And what is a transformer? A transformer is a machine, is an algorithm that can extract patterns from a sequence of data. If your data is sequential, let's say in the time dimension, let's say your customer does one thing and then they do the second thing and then they do the third thing and they take an action. So a transformer is a really good technology that can extract the insights in that time series data at the customer level. And then you can use that transformer to predict that action that the customer did. But they could do it before they do it. So now you can say, okay, well, if the customer is going to take that action, I'm going to stay out of their way. If the customer has a elevated chance of taking that action and I want them to take that action, maybe I'll just nudge them a little bit. So now you can use that in a very actionable way. So to a senior executive, the way I would explain it is it can help you predict many different customer behaviors and how you should treat that customer in a very efficient way.
Okay, this was probably the best explanation I've heard so far for Transformers. So, those, lay people who are listening, Transformers are important. So, look, I know that our time is coming to an end, but I would love to ask you about your new role over at PayPal. I mean, not so new, right? I mean, you've been at it for 1.5 years now, but how did that role come about and what is your current mission? What are you excited about?
Yeah, so I love working at PayPal. I've been here for 9 months. I think in a lot of ways, the PayPal experience feels very similar to the Amazon experience in terms of empowerment, in terms of you figure out what your destination is and figure out what your goals are, and we're going to trust that you're going to walk in that direction, and we'll evaluate you based on a shared set of goals. So a lot of things are similar. I love the direction the senior leadership is taking the organization. It's now a very tech forward, like its original days. It's very tech forward when it comes to ensuring that customers, consumers, and merchants have the best experience within the PayPal network. So I lead what's called credit infrastructure here, which is basically the tech stack that allows us to make the right credit decisions for the right customer at the right time, etc. Including, the data that goes into those decisions, the decisioning platforms, the AI, how we're using AI in the credit lifecycle, analysis of performance of the credit, monitoring the credit performance, and so on and so forth. So how this role came about 9 months ago is really interesting, and there's a funny story behind it if we have time.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so so um, so my current the person that interviewed me, who's still my current boss at PayPal. He's a wonderful person, and uh, uh, it wasn't the first time I saw him in the interview. We have a lot of common friends, but we never actually we hadn't met. The first time I met him was a year ago, actually a year before the interview. And at the time, I was thinking about a startup related to AI, of course, but it was mostly around teaching people AI, like educating organizations in AI. So I had this idea, which I thought was brilliant. So I spoke to one of a trusted advisor, and he's like, "Hey, I know this great guy, and I think you should talk to him." He has a really good head over his shoulders. I'm like, okay, let me talk to him. So we got on the phone on video and we're talking, and I pitch him the idea, and he's like, this is good, but look, I wouldn't do this. And that's kind of how we ended it. Um, and and I didn't do that idea, not necessarily because he told me not to do it, but other things kind of got in the way. And a year later, PayPal reached out to me and they pitched me this role. And I said, okay, this is interesting because I was already doing credit infrastructure at Capital One. Now at PayPal, I'm going to do it across all lending products, across all markets, 400 million customers. That's super high scale. I'm really interested in this. The direction of the company is new and looks exciting. So I said, okay, let's have a conversation. And then they said, okay, you're going to meet with this person. I look at the name and I'm like, this name seems familiar. Like I have this past trauma with this name. So, but it was a great first conversation with him, and one thing led to another, and here I am.
You never know, where the journey leads you in that sense. So this is awesome. You thought the door was closed, but then something even better was in store for you. And look, it's an exciting time to be at PayPal. You probably couldn't have chosen a better spot for it. So Nurtekin, look, this was a very, very fun conversation. We could continue. I actually had a bunch of questions and I took a bunch of notes, but I just don't get to ask you this time around. Maybe we'll have a second round at some point in the future, right? Because I enjoyed it thoroughly. And what is one single piece of advice that you would like to leave our listeners with? I really liked something that you said about human potential and constantly kind of breaking personal records, right? That really, really stuck with me when I was going through your stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah, you could definitely. So I'm a big believer in competing with yourself. You can compete with others, but I think that's less effective. So always be competing with yourself. Always be competing with who you were yesterday, and some really good strategies to beat your past self is, like we said a couple times already, trying out new things, try out new experiences, and they're going to inevitably teach you something new. Even the simplest act of doing something new, as simple as I'm going to bike to work today, which I've never done before, it's going to teach you something. And taking that one step further, always be learning. Every day, set aside even 30 minutes. 30 minutes a day, which I think everybody can find in their time for the data and analytics community here. Read about data and analytics and AI. Like that could be, you block your 30 minutes during the day, 9 to 5. Don't make it outside of your job thing. It's part of your, it's expected of you to learn and be in the forefront of this stuff. So block 30 minutes in your calendar, reading time, and pick up a report, a paper, pick a book, and read it. And it's incredible how much ground you can cover, even with just 30 minutes a day. I think, focusing on those things, you're going to make progress and surpass your past limits. Whatever you thought your limits were, you're going to see that you're shattering them one by one.
Well, I think today's 90-minute conversation was 3 days worth of learning, definitely with a lot of meat on the bone. So, sir, enjoyed it thoroughly, and until next time.
Thank you so much.